Lena had always been the kind of person who noticed small things. Dust floating in sunlight, the sound of footsteps in a quiet hallway, the way old objects carried stories in their scratches and dents. Maybe that was why she noticed the piano long before anyone else did. It sat alone in the far corner of the community center, half hidden under a faded cloth that had turned gray over the years. Most people walked past it without a second glance. Some didn't even realize it was a piano. But Lena did. She felt its presence every time she swept the floors or arranged chairs after events. Something about it pulled at her, as if it held a secret waiting to be heard. The community center wasn't a fancy place. It was warm and welcoming but old enough that everything inside had a story. The tiles were chipped, the windows squeaked when opened, and the paint peeled every few months. But the center held the neighborhood together. Kids came there after school. Parents gathered for meetings. Elderly visitors sat outside to talk. And Lena, who worked part-time helping with cleaning and setup, felt safe there. One afternoon, while she was wiping the tables, she noticed the cloth on the piano had slipped off one corner. A glimpse of the wooden edge caught her attention. She paused, walked over, and lifted the cloth completely for the first time. The sight made her stop breathing for a moment. The piano was in terrible shape. Keys were chipped or missing entirely. Some were yellowed with age, some stained. The wood was cracked along the side as if someone had dropped something heavy on it. A layer of dust coated everything, thick enough that she could write her name on it. But even in that sad state, the piano held a quiet dignity. It looked tired, but not defeated. She gently pressed one of the keys. A dull thud came out, not music, not even close. Still, she smiled. It reminded her of something she couldn't quite place, like a memory at the edge of her thoughts. Later that day, when the center manager passed by, Lena asked casually, "Does anyone ever use the piano?" The manager laughed, not unkindly but with disbelief. "That thing? Nobody touches it. It's older than half the people in this neighborhood. Someone donated it years ago, but it was barely working even then. Now it's impossible to fix. Too expensive. Too broken. So it just stays here?" she asked. "Pretty much. It's too heavy to move and too useless to bother with." He walked away, but Lena stayed, staring at the instrument. Impossible. The word sat heavy in her mind. She didn't like it. Not when something still had life left, even if people didn't see it. As she went home that evening, the piano stayed on her mind. She lived in a small apartment with her aunt, who worked long hours and barely had time to rest. Music had never been part of their daily life. But when Lena was young, her mother used to hum lullabies to her. She would hum while cooking, while folding clothes, while braiding Lena's hair. There had never been a piano in their home, just the soft melody of her mother's voice. After her mother passed away, Lena held onto those memories like fragile treasures. Maybe that was why the piano felt special. Maybe she felt drawn to it because it reminded her of something lost but not forgotten. The next day, when her shift ended and most people had left, Lena walked back to the corner. She lifted the cloth again, letting the evening light fall across the dusty surface. She sat on the old wooden bench, which creaked under her weight. She pressed a few more keys. Some made faint, broken sounds. Others made none at all. She wasn't disappointed. Instead, she felt curious. What would it take to make the piano speak again? Could it even be done? She didn't know, but she wanted to try. She began by cleaning. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She brought a dry cloth from the supply closet and started wiping the dust away. Every streak she cleared made the wood shine just a little more. She took her time, careful with every movement. Felt peaceful, almost comforting. Halfway through, one of the regular visitors, a middle-aged woman who often came in for community meetings, walked by and chuckled softly. "You're wasting your time with that thing, dear. It hasn't worked properly since I was young." Lena simply smiled. "Maybe it just needs a little care." "Care won't help something that far gone," the woman replied, shaking her head. But Lena didn't stop. She didn't mind being the only one who saw potential. She continued cleaning until the faint richness of the wood returned. It wasn't new, but it had character. When she pressed a key again, she didn't expect a miracle. The sound was still dull, yet something felt different. Maybe it was her imagination, or maybe it was hope. That night she couldn't sleep. She lay awake wondering how pianos worked. How did sound travel through strings and hammers? How were the keys connected? Eventually she grabbed her old phone and searched for videos. Beginners fixing simple problems. People cleaning old pianos. Tips on basic repairs. She watched for hours, her eyes tired but her heart excited. The next morning, she arrived at the center earlier than usual. She brought a small pouch of basic tools. Nothing fancy, just a screwdriver, an old brush, and a cloth. She lifted the piano's top board carefully. It was heavier than she expected. Inside, she saw dust, spider webs, tangled strings, and a few metal parts that looked loose. She wasn't sure what she was doing, but she worked slowly, cleaning around the strings and brushing off dirt. She tightened a screw that looked out of place. She used the videos she had watched as her guide. One of the young boys who came to the center for after-school tutoring stopped beside her. "Why are you fixing that? It's broken. I want to see if it can work again," she said. He made a face. "It won't. My brother said they tried before." "Maybe they didn't try long enough," she replied. He shrugged and walked away, already losing interest. But she didn't. She kept working until the sun streamed through the windows. Every little improvement gave her encouragement. She didn't need the piano to be perfect. She just wanted to hear one clear note, one sound that proved it wasn't truly impossible. The community center's retired technician, an older man who often dropped by to talk to staff, noticed her crouched over the piano one afternoon. He watched her quietly for a minute before stepping closer. "You're brave for opening that thing," he said gently. Startled, she stood and stepped aside. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "No need to apologize. I'm impressed," he said, examining the inside. "Most people wouldn't bother. I just want to see if I can make it sound better." He nodded thoughtfully. "It won't be easy, but it's not impossible. People just say that because they're impatient." Her eyes brightened. "So it can be fixed?" "With enough time, yes. But you'll need to understand how it breathes. A piano is like a living thing in its own way." He pointed to a set of strings. "These are loose, and some hammers are worn out. You'll need to be gentle." He didn't take over. He didn't tell her to stop. Instead, he guided her, showing her which parts she could clean, which screws she could tighten, and which areas she should leave alone. For the first time, Lena felt like someone believed in her effort. As the days passed, fixing the piano became her quiet routine. Work, clean, help others, then return to the corner and continue her small repairs. The community still doubted her, but they grew used to seeing her sitting there with determination in her eyes. Every day, the piano looked a little less abandoned. The dust was gone. The wood shined faintly. The inside was clearer. Even though the sound was still weak, something inside it had changed. One evening, when she pressed a key she had been working on for days, it produced a soft note. Not perfect but steady enough that she froze in surprise. She tried it again. The note repeated. It wasn't much, but to Lena, it felt like the piano had whispered its first word. And for the first time since she laid eyes on it, she felt certain. This wasn't the end of the piano's story. It was only the beginning. Lena didn't know when her quiet fascination with the piano had turned into a daily routine, but by the second week, she found herself hurrying through her chores just to reach the corner where the instrument sat. It had become her private place, her quiet space, where time slowed down and the world softened. She didn't mind that others didn't understand. She didn't mind that most people still called it the impossible piano. She wasn't trying to prove anything. She just wanted to hear it speak again. But wanting something and understanding it were two very different things. And Lena learned that every day. One morning, she opened the piano's lid and stared at the maze of strings, hammers, and wooden parts. It felt like looking at the inside of a clock, complex, delicate, and strangely beautiful. She had watched video after video the night before, trying to learn the basics of how a piano worked. Her eyes were tired, but her curiosity burned stronger. She touched one of the strings gently and watched it shiver. It made no sound. Another string was snapped completely. A third looked bent, as if someone had struck a key too hard years ago. She sighed. "What happened to you?" she whispered. Of course, the piano didn't answer, but she felt a strange connection to it, as if it understood what it meant to be overlooked, to feel invisible, to feel like others had already made up their minds about what you could or couldn't be. As she wiped the inside carefully with a small brush, she remembered her mother again. Her mother had always encouraged her to try things, even when they seemed difficult. "Life isn't about being perfect," she used to say. "It's about caring enough to begin." Thinking about that made Lena smile. Maybe she wasn't trying to fix the piano. Maybe she was simply trying to begin again in her own way. Later that day, the older technician walked in. His name wasn't known to many because he wasn't officially part of the staff. He was just someone who visited the center often, offering advice whenever something broke. Lena didn't know much about him, but she appreciated his gentle patience. He approached quietly, looking over her shoulder. "You're still at it." Lena nodded. "I don't want to give up." "I didn't think you would," he said with a small laugh. "Most people stop before they start. But you pay attention." She lowered her eyes shyly. "I just want to see if I can help it." The man reached inside the piano and pointed at a set of hammers. "These are misaligned. That's why some keys don't respond. If you adjust them a little, the hammers will hit the strings properly." "Can I try?" she asked. "You should," he said. "Just be gentle, like you're fixing a delicate piece of jewelry." Lena followed his guidance, moving the tiny parts carefully. Some screws were loose, some were stuck, some wouldn't budge at all. She wasn't frustrated, though. Every small adjustment felt like a step forward. At one point, a group of kids ran past, laughing loudly. One of them pointed at her and said, "She's still messing with that broken thing." Another responded, "Why bother? It'll never work." They meant no harm. Kids rarely understood the weight of their words, but their laughter stung a little. The technician glanced after them and then back at Lena. "Don't take it to heart," he said softly. "People laugh at things they don't understand." She looked at him. "Do you think it can work?" He paused, studying the piano thoughtfully. "I think it can sound better. Maybe not perfect, but better. And sometimes that's enough." Lena nodded, a quiet strength rising inside her. She didn't need perfection. She needed progress. Over the next few days, she developed a rhythm. She cleaned, adjusted, tightened, and learned. Every time she fixed a small part, she felt a sense of satisfaction, like she was slowly uncovering the piano's hidden spirit. But fixing was only half the journey. The other half was understanding herself. One evening, when she was almost done for the day, the technician sat beside her. "Do you play?" he asked. She shook her head. "I've never learned." "But you want to, don't you?" She hesitated. "I always thought, maybe one day, but lessons are expensive. And I never had the chance." The man nodded knowingly. Music isn't just about lessons. It's about listening, feeling. Anyone can learn if they care enough. She smiled softly. "I don't know if I can play well." "You don't need to play well," he said. "You only need to play honestly." His words stayed with her. Honest. Maybe that was why she felt drawn to the piano. It didn't pretend to be anything. It didn't hide its flaws. It simply existed as it was, broken but not silent. That night, she stayed later than usual. The center was quiet, and only a few lights were left on. She sat in front of the piano, the bench creaking under her. She pressed a repaired key softly, produced a tiny, shaky sound. But it was there. She closed her eyes and pressed another. Then another. The sounds were uneven, some louder, some softer, some almost silent. But to her, it felt like the piano was speaking again, slowly waking from a long sleep. For a moment, she imagined how it must have sounded years ago, when it was new. She imagined families gathering around it, children learning their first song, someone practicing late at night. She imagined laughter, music, and memories filling the room. It made her want to bring that feeling back. Not for herself, but for the community that had long forgotten it. The next day, something unexpected happened. As she worked on the piano, a young girl who often came for art classes approached her. She stood quietly for a moment before speaking. "Can I watch?" the girl asked. Lena nodded. "Of course." The girl sat on the floor, hugging her sketchbook. "My grandma used to play the piano," she said softly. "She said every piano has a heart." Lena paused at that. "A heart?" The girl nodded. "She said if you listen carefully, you can feel it beating." Lena smiled at the sweet idea. Maybe this one still has a heartbeat too. The girl watched Lena clean and tighten parts, her eyes bright with curiosity. "Will it work again?" "I'm trying," Lena said. "It might take a while." "I think you can do it," the girl said confidently. "You look like someone who doesn't give up." Lena felt warmth bloom in her chest. It was a simple compliment, but it meant more than the girl could have known. As days turned into a week, more people began noticing her work. Not with mockery now, but with curiosity. Some peeked into the corner to see what had changed. Others asked questions. Some simply watched quietly. Slowly, the lonely piano wasn't so lonely anymore. The technician continued guiding her, teaching her names of parts, showing her where to be careful. He explained how the hammers struck the strings, how sound traveled through the soundboard, how tension created music. "It's like fixing a voice," he said once. "Every part helps it speak." Lena took those words to heart. Every day she listened closely, to the piano and to herself. She learned to hear tiny differences in sound, to feel when something was aligned or off, to trust her hands even when she doubted her knowledge. And slowly more keys began to respond. Not beautifully, not fully, but enough to give her hope. One afternoon, when she pressed a group of keys gently, they produced a faint melody. A simple pattern, uneven and weak, but undeniably music. She froze, her heart thudding. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't strong. But it was real. The piano was waking up. When the technician heard it, he gave her a proud smile. "You've done more than most people would have tried." Lena looked at the piano, then at her own hands. "I just kept going," she whispered. "And that," he said, "is what brings things back to life." For the first time since she had discovered it, Lena no longer saw the piano as broken. She saw it as healing. And she knew, deep down, that its voice was only beginning to return. Lena arrived at the community center earlier than usual the next week, feeling a quiet excitement settle in her chest. The sun had barely risen, and the hallways were still filled with cool morning air. She walked straight to the dusty corner where the piano stood waiting, as if it knew she would come. Every day she returned, the instrument seemed less like an abandoned object and more like an old friend slowly waking up after a long rest. She pulled the cloth fully aside and ran her hand over the surface. The wood felt smoother now, warmer to the touch. She had polished it many times, but it wasn't just the cleaning that made it feel different. It was the connection she had built with it. Something soft, patient, and unspoken. She opened the lid and examined the inside carefully. The strings she had cleaned were still shining. The small adjustments she had made still held steady. And though the piano was still far from perfect, it no longer looked like something forgotten. She sat on the bench and gently pressed a few keys. The sounds that emerged were still uneven, but there was a new strength behind them. A few weeks ago, she would hear only dull thuds. Now she heard something closer to real notes, shaky but alive. Her lips curved into a smile. "You're getting better," she whispered. The sound of footsteps echoed behind her, and she turned to see the older technician entering the room. He carried a small toolbox with him, worn out but neatly arranged. "You're early today," he said kindly. "I couldn't wait," she admitted. He nodded as if he understood completely. "Good, because today I brought something for you." He opened the toolbox and pulled out a small tuning hammer. It was old, but still sturdy. Her eyes widened. "Is that a tuning hammer?" he finished. You've cleaned the inside well. You've fixed what you can without special tools. Now it's time to try tuning it. Lena swallowed. I've never tuned anything before. That's all right, he said. Tuning takes patience, and you have plenty of that. He showed her how to place the tool on the tuning pins and how to listen closely for the sound. He explained how tiny movements made big changes, and how she had to adjust with care. Lena tried her first string. Her hands shook slightly, but the technician didn't rush her. She turned the hammer gently, and the note rose just a little. She tried again, adjusting it until the sound steadied. The technician listened. Not bad. Try another. She continued slowly, string by string. Some came easily. Others refused to cooperate. A few times, she had to stop because the sound cracked in a way that made her laugh nervously. You're learning, he said, smiling at her worried face. That's what matters. By afternoon, she had tuned several strings, still imperfect but noticeably stronger. The piano sounded like it was trying to remember its old self. As she continued practicing, Lena's mind drifted back to her childhood. She remembered sitting by the window while her mother hummed softly. She remembered wanting to follow the melodies with her own voice but being too shy. Music wasn't something she grew up with. It was something she admired from afar, like a beautiful world she wasn't sure she belonged to. Now, with her hands adjusting the delicate strings, she felt a quiet sense of belonging she had never known before. By late afternoon, the community center became busier. People arrived for classes, children ran through the halls, and adults gathered in groups to chat. Some passerby glanced toward the corner, curious about the soft sounds emerging from the piano. A few even paused to listen. One of the boys who had teased her earlier stopped again. This time he didn't laugh. Instead, he stared at the piano, surprised. It sounds different, he said. Lena nodded. I've been fixing it little by little. He pressed a key carefully. The note rang out stronger than before. His eyes widened. Whoa, it actually works. She smiled. It's starting to. He grinned and ran off to tell his friends, and Lena couldn't help but laugh softly. Even small reactions like that made her feel proud. Later that evening, the technician returned to check her progress. He listened as she played a few simple notes, testing the sound. You've done well, he said, looking genuinely impressed. It's still not perfect, she said. It doesn't need to be, he replied. You're bringing it back to life, piece by piece. That's more meaningful than perfection. His words warmed her, and she let herself enjoy the moment. She had never been praised for something like this before, something that required patience, care, and steady hands. That night, she stayed after closing again. The center was dim, with only a single hallway light glowing faintly. She sat in front of the piano and pressed a soft pattern of notes she had memorized from an online video. She didn't know the name of the tune. It was just a simple beginner melody. The notes were uneven, some softer than others, but they formed a shape, a beginning. As the melody repeated, she felt something gentle unfold in her chest, like a memory or a feeling she had kept hidden. The piano didn't sound beautiful yet, but it sounded hopeful. And maybe that was more important. Over the next week, her routine continued. Clean, adjust, tune, test, repeat. Some days she felt frustrated when a key refused to cooperate. Other days she felt joy when she heard a clear note. Each small victory kept her moving forward. The community started noticing more too. People who normally passed by without interest now paused to listen. A few asked questions. Others shared old memories of when the piano used to be played during events many years ago. A middle-aged man told her, I remember hearing my daughter practice on that piano when she was young. It had such a warm sound. I'm glad someone is taking care of it again. A woman added, I thought it was impossible to fix, but you've proved everyone wrong. Their words made her heart swell, not because she wanted praise, but because she wanted the piano to feel valued again. One afternoon, while she was tightening a key mechanism, the little girl with the sketchbook appeared again. I drew something for you, the girl said shyly, holding out a piece of paper. Lena took it gently. It was a drawing of the piano, her piano, surrounded by bright colors. In the drawing, the piano had a big smiling face on it. "Thank you," Lena said softly. "This is beautiful." The girl grinned. "My grandma said pianos feel happier when someone cares for them." Lena placed the drawing carefully beside the piano. "Then this one must be very happy." The girl nodded confidently. "It looks happier than before." After the girl left, Lena looked at the drawing again and felt a warm wave of emotion. Someone had noticed the piano's change, not in sound, but in spirit. And that made her work feel even more meaningful. That evening, as she practiced tuning the same set of keys, she heard footsteps again. The technician stood beside her quietly. "You've reached a turning point," he said. "What do you mean?" she asked. "You're no longer repairing it," he said. "You're restoring it. There's a difference." She looked at him curiously. "Repairing is fixing what's broken," he explained. "Restoring is giving something its soul back." She stared at the piano thoughtfully. He was right. She wasn't just trying to make it functional. She was giving it life again. When he left, she sat in front of the piano and played the little melody once more. This time, the notes were clearer. Not perfect, but smoother, stronger. The sound filled the quiet room, and something inside her chest tightened. Not painfully, but in a way that made her eyes sting. She wiped her eyes quickly. She wasn't sad. She was proud. She realized then that she wasn't just rebuilding the piano. The piano was rebuilding her too, giving her confidence, patience, and a sense of meaning she had never felt before. And as she pressed the final note, letting it ring softly through the empty hall, she whispered, "We're getting there." In that moment, Lena understood something clearly for the first time. The piano wasn't impossible. It was becoming possible, one small step at a time. The morning of the community concert arrived quietly, almost too quietly. The air felt cold for a spring day, and the sky was pale, as if the sunlight was waiting for something before fully showing itself. She woke up before the alarm, unable to sleep any longer. Her mind had been replaying the same thoughts over and over again. Would the piano work? Would her hands freeze? Would people laugh if the old instrument betrayed her? She tried not to think too much. Instead, she got ready slowly, tying her hair carefully, smoothing the loose threads on her simple dress, and checking the small bag where she kept her sheet music. Even though she wouldn't use the sheets on stage, holding them always brought her comfort. When she stepped outside, the streets were still quiet. Only a few shopkeepers were opening their shutters, brushing morning dust off their thresholds. She walked with her shoulders slightly tense, taking a long breath every few steps. She kept telling herself that she had practiced enough, prepared enough, and repaired the piano as much as she could. What happened next was no longer in her control. The community hall came into view, standing at the end of a row of low buildings. It looked old and serious from the outside, with tall windows and fading paint, but she had always found it comforting. This was the same hall where her mother once sang in a local choir, the same hall where music teachers used to hold small holiday programs. It wasn't grand, but it carried memories, and today, it carried her hopes. When she pushed the side door open, she heard voices. A few volunteers were already setting up chairs in neat rows. Someone was testing the lights. A man was checking the microphones. She quietly walked toward the stage, hoping to rehearse a little before people arrived. The piano sat in its place under the warm stage lights, looking almost like a softened shadow compared to last week. Its wood still showed signs of age, but now it had a glow, gentle, subtle, but real. She had polished it the night before, running the cloth over every corner as if she were whispering kindness into the instrument. She placed her hand on the lid and felt warmth where she expected cold wood. That small surprise made her smile. "You're early," someone said from behind. She turned to find the hall coordinator walking toward her, holding a clipboard. He wasn't usually emotional, but today his voice carried something like curiosity. "I wanted to check the piano one more time," she said softly. He nodded, glancing at the instrument. "People have been talking. They're excited to hear you." Her heart fluttered with both hope and fear. "I hope I don't disappoint anyone." "You won't," he said simply, then walked off to finish his tasks. She sat on the bench, lifted the fallboard gently, and touched the keys. They felt smoother than they had on the first day, though still uneven. She pressed one note, then another. The sound echoed through the empty hall, rich, fuller than before, as if the piano felt alive again. She began to play slowly, letting her hands warm up. The notes floated up, filling the space. Even though the hall was mostly empty, she felt something different this time. The room didn't feel big and intimidating anymore. It felt like a partner, ready to carry her music, ready to reflect her heart. She practiced for almost an hour, stopping only when the hall started filling with people preparing for their own performances. A young violinist tuned her instrument on the opposite side of the stage. A small group of children rehearsed a short folk song. Someone tested the stage lights, casting soft beams that made the dust particles sparkle like tiny stars. By midday, the hall was buzzing with sound. Families found their seats. Musicians lined up backstage. Volunteers whispered reminders. She stood among them, feeling her palms grow warmer as the moments passed. Her turn wasn't early. She had to wait through several performances, each one making her heart beat faster. Not out of competition, but out of growing nervousness. Every time a performer finished, and the host announced the next act, she felt the knot in her stomach tighten a little more. When the violinist finished his piece and the applause faded, she heard her name being called. Her throat tightened. It was time. She stepped out from behind the curtain, trying to steady her breathing. The hall looked bigger from the front. Lights shone on her softly, making it hard to see individual faces. She only saw a blur of people, some leaning forward, some settling deeper into their seats, some whispering to each other. She bowed gently, then sat down at the piano. For a moment she didn't move. She simply rested her hands on her knees and closed her eyes. The old piano had held many stories. Today, she hoped, it would hold one more. The one she had poured her heart into all week. She placed her fingers on the keys. They felt warm again, as if encouraging her. Then she played the first note. It rang through the hall, clearer than she had dared to hope. It wasn't perfect, but it had depth, character, and honesty. She let her hands continue, the melody unfolding gently like a soft breeze turning into a warm wave. People stopped shifting in their seats. She didn't look up, but she could feel it. The room getting quieter, listening more carefully. The music grew. Her hands moved with more confidence. She forgot the uneven keys, the fragile internal parts, the chipped edges. She forgot her fear. She forgot that this piano was ever considered impossible. Right now, it felt like magic, like she had reached inside the instrument and touched its sleeping soul, waking it slowly. Each note carried part of her. Her struggles, her quiet joys, the evenings she spent alone practicing, the moments when she thought she wasn't enough. Everything came out in the gentle rise and fall of the music. Near the middle of her piece, she felt something shift. Not in the piano, but in the room. The audience wasn't just listening, they were connecting. She could sense it in the stillness, the silence that followed each phrase, the unbroken attention that wrapped around the hall like a warm blanket. Her music grew softer, softer, softer still. She let the melody settle like dust in sunlight. Then she played the final note, light, tender, almost like a whisper, and the hall stayed silent. For a long moment nobody moved. No one clapped. No one breathed loudly. It wasn't the awkward kind of silence. It was the kind that comes when people feel something unexpectedly deep. Then applause broke like a wave. Strong, sincere, filling the room completely. She looked up for the first time and saw people rising to their feet. A few wiped their eyes. Some smiled widely. Others simply clapped with a kind of warmth she hadn't seen before. She sat there, stunned, unsure what to do. A volunteer at the side of the stage gave her a small nod, encouraging her to stand. She rose slowly, bowed again, and felt her heart beating so fast she thought it might burst. She had never received applause like this, not even close. As she stepped backstage, she heard the host speaking into the microphone. praising her beautiful performance and the surprising revival of the old piano that everyone used to avoid. She walked behind the curtain, breath shaky, hands trembling. Not from fear now, but from something close to joy. One of the older musicians approached her. He had been performing for decades. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder and said, "I don't know how you did that, but thank you. That was beautiful." Another performer added, "That piano hasn't sounded like that in years." She didn't know what to say. I tried my best." The older musician smiled kindly. "You didn't just try, you transformed it." Those words settled deep inside her. She wasn't someone who usually received praise. She wasn't someone who stood in bright lights or held attention. She simply loved music. She loved the piano, and she loved giving old things another chance. Maybe that was enough. As she sat backstage, listening to the rest of the performances, she kept replaying the moment in her mind. Not the applause, not the attention, but the way the old piano had come alive under her hands. The sound it produced was more than she had hoped for. It was like the instrument itself had wanted to be heard again, after being ignored for so long. She touched her fingers gently, still feeling the vibration of the music inside them. For the first time in a long while, she felt proud, not in a loud way, but in a quiet, peaceful way that warmed her from within. She didn't know what the others were thinking, or what opportunities might come next, or whether anyone would remember this day weeks from now. But she knew one thing with certainty. She had taken something impossible and made it shine. The applause from the hall continued in her mind long after she stepped behind the curtain. Even when the next performance began, even when the noise of the audience softened, she could still hear the echo of hands clapping, rising and falling like waves against the shore. Her heart hadn't calmed yet. It beat fast, almost too fast, as if it didn't know how to settle after so much emotion. She found a quiet corner backstage and sat down, rubbing her hands gently. They were still warm from the piano keys. She kept looking at them, almost surprised by what they had just done. She had played in front of people before, but never with such feeling, and never with such a response. The old piano had surprised her too. She had hoped it would sound better, cleaner, smoother, but it had done more than that. It had carried her emotions as if it understood them. As she sat there, lost in thought, a soft voice called her name. She looked up to see an elderly woman standing near her. The woman had silver hair tied back neatly and wore a long coat over a simple dress. Her eyes were warm, gentle, the kind that carried stories of many years lived. She held a small program booklet in her hand. "May I sit?" the woman asked. She nodded quickly and moved a little to the side, giving space. The woman lowered herself onto the bench next to her, smiling. "I just wanted to tell you. Your performance meant something to me." She felt her cheeks warm. She didn't know how to respond. The woman continued, "My husband used to play that same piano many years ago. He taught music here in this hall. When he passed away, I stopped coming. It was too painful. But today, I felt brave enough to return." She paused, her gaze softening. "And I'm glad I did, because when you played, it reminded me of him. Not in a sad way, in a gentle, comforting way." Her chest tightened with emotion. She hadn't expected her music to reach someone so deeply. "I'm honored," she whispered. The woman touched her hand lightly. "You brought the piano back to life. Thank you." Before she could say anything more, a volunteer came looking for the woman, saying she had dropped something earlier. The woman gave her one last warm smile and walked away slowly. She sat in silence, absorbing the moment. It felt unreal, like something she would only read in a story, not experience herself. And yet, here it was. Real, honest, unexpected. A few minutes later, the hall coordinator came backstage with a clipboard tucked under his arm. He looked more excited than she had ever seen him. "There you are," he said, almost out of breath. "I've been searching for you." She stood quickly. "Is everything all right?" "More than all right," he said, a smile breaking across his usually serious face. "People want to talk to you. A few musicians are asking if you'll play again later. A couple of parents want their children to meet you." And he paused for dramatic effect. Someone important is waiting outside the hall. Her eyebrows lifted. Someone important? Yes. A guest judge from the city music board came to watch the performances today. He wasn't planning to stay long, but after your piece, he didn't leave. He wants to speak with you. Her heart stumbled. With me? The coordinator nodded. You made an impression. A big one. A strange blend of nerves and excitement surged through her. She followed him out of the backstage area, through the side door, and into the hallway where several people were standing in small groups. As soon as she appeared, a few heads turned. That's her, someone whispered. She played beautifully. She made that old piano sound new. She tried to smile politely, though her hands tightened slightly at her sides. She wasn't used to this much attention. People usually walked past her without noticing, but now they looked at her with respect, curiosity, maybe even admiration. Felt overwhelming, but also strangely comforting. The coordinator led her toward a tall man standing near the exit. He wore a dark coat and carried a leather notebook. His expression was calm, serious, but not cold. When he saw her approach, he smiled warmly. Thank you for waiting, the coordinator said to him. This is the performer I told you about. The man extended his hand. It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm from the city music board, and I must say, he paused, choosing his words carefully. Your performance was genuine, rare, very rare. She shook his hand, feeling her pulse quicken. Thank you, she murmured. I've heard many talented musicians, he said. But what you did was different. You didn't just play notes. You told a story. You connected with the piano in a way that's not common. She swallowed hard. Her throat felt tight. He continued, I'd like to hear you play again, perhaps in a more formal setting. We're holding a regional showcase next month, and I believe you would be a strong addition. Her breath caught. A showcase? She asked, unsure if she heard correctly. Yes, he said. A gathering of selected musicians from our region. It's not a competition, just a chance for talented individuals to perform in front of mentors, teachers, and even potential sponsors. Her mind raced. She had never thought her playing would reach beyond the community hall. She had never imagined performing in front of professionals, let alone being invited. I understand this might be sudden, he added gently. You don't have to decide right away, but think about it. Opportunities like this don't appear often. She nodded slowly, still stunned. I'll think about it, she said softly. He handed her a small card with his contact details. When you're ready, call or send a message. I truly hope you say yes. He gave her one last polite smile and left through the hall's main doors. She stood there, staring at the card. The coordinator watched her with a proud expression. You did this, he said. Not the piano, not luck, you. Her eyes softened. I just played how I felt. And that, he said gently, is exactly why people connected. When the event ended, she helped a few volunteers fold chairs and gather leftover programs. She didn't have to help, but it felt natural to contribute, just like she always had. But today, every task felt lighter, almost joyful. As she walked home later, the afternoon sun finally broke through the clouds. Golden light warmed the streets, casting long shadows behind her. The town looked the same as every other day. Simple shops, familiar roads, quiet corners, but she felt different, as if something inside her had shifted, opening a door she never knew existed. She remembered the elderly woman's words. She remembered the applause. She remembered the offer from the music board. And she remembered the feeling she had when she touched the piano keys. How the instrument had responded, almost like a friend speaking back. When she reached her small home, she placed the card on her table and sat down, staring at it with a soft smile. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know whether she would be brave enough to perform on a bigger stage or meet new expectations. But she knew one thing. Something had begun today. Something she never thought possible. And though she still felt nervous, she also felt hopeful, truly hopeful, for the first time in a long while. She closed her eyes, took a slow breath, and whispered to herself, "Let's see where this goes." And somewhere inside her, a quiet courage awoke. Steady, gentle, ready. The night before the showcase felt different from every other night she had lived. Her small room was silent except for the faint ticking of a wall clock. The card from the city music board lay on the table, the edges slightly worn from how often she had picked it up, put it down, held it, and worried over it. Now, after weeks of thinking, practicing, and gathering courage, she had finally said yes. The showcase was tomorrow. She stood near her window, watching the dim lights of the neighborhood. Everything looked normal, calm, unchanged. Yet inside her, nothing felt the same. She had practiced every day after work, sometimes until her fingers ached. She played simple melodies at first, then more difficult ones. She watched videos again, took notes, tried different rhythms, explored emotions in the keys. She wanted to be ready, not perfect, but ready. But now, on the eve of something bigger than she ever imagined, fear and excitement blended inside her chest in a way she couldn't untangle. She sat on the edge of her bed, rubbing her palms slowly. "I can do this," she whispered to herself, though her voice trembled slightly. She wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. She simply didn't want to disappoint the people who had believed in her. The old technician, the elderly woman, the coordinator, and everyone who had clapped for her that night in the hall. The morning arrived faster than she expected. She hardly slept, but she rose early. She stood in front of her mirror, took a breath, and gathered her hair back neatly. She chose simple clothes, not too fancy, not too plain. Something that made her feel comfortable. On her way to the city venue, she held onto her small bag tightly. The streets buzzed with life. Buses honking, children laughing on sidewalks, vendors calling out for customers. But her mind was quiet. It had to be. This day mattered. The music center was larger than she imagined. Wide hallways, polished floors, high ceilings. Everything felt bigger, brighter, more serious. She paused at the entrance for a moment, unsure if she should really step inside. But then she remembered how the old piano had once seemed impossible too. With a deep breath, she walked forward. A woman at the registration desk greeted her kindly and handed her a small card with her performance number. "You're in the second group," the woman said. "You'll be called soon. Make yourself comfortable." She nodded and followed the signs to the waiting area. Dozens of performers sat on chairs, some tuning instruments, some practicing finger exercises, some simply waiting with eyes closed. She felt a wave of nervous energy move through the room. She found an empty seat at the edge and sat down quietly. Her fingers tapped lightly against her knee, as if they were searching for a familiar melody to calm her. After a few minutes, someone sat beside her. "First time?" a young man asked with a friendly smile. She nodded. "Is it that obvious?" "A little," he said with a light laugh. "Don't worry. Everyone here is nervous, no matter how many times they've performed. It means you care." She smiled faintly, appreciating the comfort. "Just play how you feel," he added before he was called to the stage. When her group was finally called, her heart thumped so loudly she wondered if others could hear it. She followed the participants into the backstage hallway. A staff member pointed her toward a bench and told her she would be next. The sound of the performer before her drifted softly from the stage. Light, delicate playing. She closed her eyes and inhaled slowly, trying to steady her nerves. When her turn arrived, a staff member gestured gently toward the stage entrance. She stood, wiped her hands on her clothes discreetly, and stepped forward. The moment she walked onto the stage, the lights warmed her face. The audience sat in silence, waiting. She didn't look directly at them. Instead, she focused on the piano. The smooth surface, the quiet shine of its keys, the familiar invitation it held. She sat down, adjusting the bench slightly. Her hands hovered above the keys, trembling for a moment. And then she remembered the day she fixed the first string in the old piano, the moment it first made a sound for her. She remembered how she had played that night at the community hall, how the elderly woman had thanked her, how the technician had smiled with pride. She let those memories anchor her. She began to play. The melody started gently, almost like a whisper. Notes rose and fell naturally, as if the piano breathed with her. The hall remained silent, listening. She didn't rush. Every key she pressed carried an emotion she had lived. Her quiet struggles, her long nights, her small victories. As the piece grew, her confidence grew with it. Her hands moved easily, gracefully. She felt connected to the piano in a way she never had before. Not because the instrument was perfect, but because she believed in the moment. When she reached the final notes, they rang softly in the hall before fading into silence. And then the applause began. Not loud or wild, but warm, steady, sincere. The kind that touches more than it surprises. She bowed gently and stepped off the stage, her heart swelling with relief. Backstage, she found a small seat and sank into it, covering her face for a moment as she caught her breath. She had done it. Truly done it. A member of the music board approached her, the same man who had invited her weeks ago. He looked genuinely impressed. "You played beautifully," he said. "You have something special, something that cannot be taught. You play with feeling, and that is rare." She lowered her eyes shyly. "Thank you. I was nervous." "Nervous means you're human," he replied with a smile. "But your music was calm. That balance is precious." He handed her a small envelope. "Inside is an invitation. We're offering you a place in a seasonal mentorship program. You'll have access to teachers, practice rooms, guidance, whatever you need to grow. No pressure. Think about it." She took the envelope carefully, her hands shaking. I appreciate this. More than I can say." "You earned it," he said simply. She held the envelope close as she left the center. The sun was setting outside, painting the sky with soft colors. She walked slowly, absorbing the moment. Every step felt lighter, as if the weight she carried for years had finally eased. When she arrived home, she placed the envelope on her table. She didn't open it right away. Instead, she sat quietly, thinking about everything that had happened. The old broken piano, the first trembling melody, the warm applause at the hall, the encouragement from strangers, and now, this new opportunity. She finally broke the seal and read the letter. It wasn't fancy or decorated. It was simple, direct, and full of possibility. As she read it, she felt something rise inside her. Not pride, not excitement, but a calm belief in herself. She looked around her small home, then at the window where the soft evening breeze blew the curtain gently, and she smiled. The impossible piano had done more than shine. It had lit a path she never dared to imagine, and she was ready to walk it,